Hello, I'm Angie Cooney and welcome to my podcast, Now What? Today I am delighted to be talking to David Mintz. Many may know you from property or kerfuffle or any of the other hats that he wears. So because of the length of the podcast, we're going to split it into two. So welcome to part one. Hello, I'm Angie Cooney and welcome to my podcast, Now What? Today I'm joined by David Mintz, who I am really thrilled to call my friend, and we're going to delve into his story. So without further ado, David Mintz, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
You're most welcome. What I'd like to do, because I think that everybody will, I know that when you introduce people on your podcast, you'll say silly things like, I'm in property royalty presence, and I actually do feel like that with you. So I'm a bit sort of starstruck, but in all seriousness, you are very prolific in social media in different ways. But I want to know the David Mintz's story and where we are in your now what moments, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So, David Mintz,
who
are you?
I mean, if you want to know what happened before social media.
I would love you to go back, where you're from. We'll do a little bit about that.
Okay. So I'm from a little part of the world called Salford in Manchester.
Teeny part of the world.
A tiny little part of the world. We do get some newspaper coverage, and we've got some fairly big stars that come
Can
out
I
of
just say,
Manchester.
Andy Burnham?
Andy Burnham.
I can't believe you interviewed him.
He's a very impressive character. Possible future Prime Minister of the country. I don't know how we feel about that, but he was very charismatic. But I come from Salford in Manchester, and that's where I grew up. And I suppose I had a fairly kind of normal-ish upbringing. I think my parents didn't. This is my kind of like sob story, but my parents didn't enjoy the happiest of marriages in the world, although they were very focused on trying to give their kids whatever they could.
Did they stay together?
They did, which I think is now looking back. Would I have advised them to stay together? Probably not.
They're still alive now?
Yeah. They're probably watching. My mum watches everything that I'm on.
Of course she does.
So she'll hate this, but.
So did you have any now? Okay, so obviously bearing in mind what you've just said about your parents and your mum, so hello mum. In terms of do you remember any of this period of it? Were any now what moments there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so the reason I kind of mentioned it is that I would credit my upbringing or perhaps my parents' relationship on my sense of humour, if you like, that I developed out of it. So anybody that knows me will know that I have a bit of a naughty sense of humour in terms of I tend to look at maybe the darker side of life, but also that I genuinely don't think there's anything that we all go through together that cannot be made fun of in an affectionate sort of way. And I think that sometimes in our industry particularly, we are guilty of taking ourselves far too seriously.
Okay.
And so I've liked the fact that I've been able to do that over the years a little bit. But I think the reason why that sense of humour was important is that it was sort of a survival mechanism, because I've got 3 younger sisters, and very often my parents were sort of out of action with their own sort of problems and working life and so on. And so it fell to me to sort of, I don't want to say raise them, but kind of keep morale up whilst mum and dad weren't necessarily around. And so the way that we did that was by developing this really weird sense of humour, which meant that we could make fun of all the kind of bad things in life. So is it a now what moment? I suppose it's one of those turning points where you realise, hang on, if I inject humour at the right point, I can really lighten the load for a lot of people and make it easier to get through a particularly difficult period of time.
Okay.
So I suppose that was
I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
Because there's a little thing that I want to anyway, yes. So yes,
So
you grew up
so yeah, so
eldest of
but
4 children.
yeah, eldest of 4 girls. I was the eldest girl.
Of course.
And so, you know, very much sort
Is
of
this the big now what? You were
that's my big
Davina.
now.
You were Davina, and
Ta-da,
geez,
I'm
on
coming.
comes David. Well, there you go.
No, do you know what though? You sort of do. I don't think you can grow up to be a chauvinist in a house full of women. But basically, you know, if you're not gelling as part of the pack, then you know it doesn't work. And I think I learned a lot of stuff in terms of communication and what's important to different people. I think putting it that way. So and that upbringing was relatively, I would say, humble, but it's middle class. You know, I got access to decent education and so on. And I don't think my parents had sort of like every good Jewish boy. I think they'd aspired for me to be a doctor or something like that. But I wasn't quite academically gifted enough to do that at that point. My academics came in quite late in life. But I ended up taking a job when I was 16 as an office junior in an estate agency just after school. And I did more of that than I did of my A levels, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, yeah. Fell into it like many agents.
Like many agents, yeah.
So what I was talking to Ben Madden about you, and I said to him, of all the people that I know,
Yeah.
you are the one person, truly the one person I would trust to sell my house with.
Thank you.
Because
That
I
means a
think
lot.
that you are the ultimate professional, personable, and would be a self-employed model if you were even bothered to do that.
Yeah.
But you are. And the things that you write now, for me anyway, are so what everybody aspires to be. You lock into your area and you explore all of that. But of course, take that as a compliment. 'Cause I'm not here to talk about property, but it is true.
It's lovely to hear that, and I've got to say, I wish that I understood that earlier in my life.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that you've got to learn. I think in many ways it'd be dangerous if we all woke up at the age of 20 with this kind of knowledge of this is exactly what I've got to do in order to win people's trust and to form connections with people. But I think what it comes down to is that when you see that sort of content that I'm starting to push out a bit more now, it is, I mean, you sent me a text message the other day that said brave.
Yeah.
That's all it said.
Yeah.
And I think what that means is that, you know, you are starting to be a bit more genuine, you're starting to be a bit more real and actually talk with your own voice. And ultimately, you know, they say sincerity is the hardest thing to fake. But if you could, you'd be an excellent estate agent. I think you don't need to do it. So as an agent, if you want to win sort of hearts and minds and trust and so on, just try and be.
Do you think that's agency, or do you think that's people in general? Because it's got to be within you. This isn't a podcast by estate agents for estate agents. And I'm trying to be very clear about that.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lesson for most people on that.
I think so. I think it's just human behaviour, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's human psychology, and I think in this, and this is a message for the wider business world. I think we're all at this stage where we've got all this new technology, we've got AI, and we're not sure of what's incredibly real.
Yeah.
And I think anything that you can put out there that we can pinpoint as being real, that this is Ben in front of his, you know, his work, his shop, his community, or this is David talking directly about his own experiences, that can help people differentiate. They're seeing a sea of kind of pre-made stuff these days.
It's all very, I saw the banter that you had about Toby and all of that, because it's such a saturated space, isn't it now? Excuse me. And I agree in terms of it's got to about being, the word I hate the most, authentic. It's about being real. And that's what I think that you have gone full circle. I think you and Rowan Waller are actually going full circle. Can you see that?
And I like Rowan. Yeah, I think you do. I think you have to be cynical though at some point to be able to come full circle. So, in order to sort of stand up and sort of be genuine, if I would have written the sort of stuff that I wrote last week, for instance, about the area that I serve and the property that I was looking at, if I would have read that 5 years ago, I would have said, who does this guy think
Yeah,
he
yeah.
is? You know, how dare he sort of just act like he owns the place and sort of talking about it in such personal terms. And I think that's the cynical side of you. But I think you need to go through that whole cynical process to get to a cleaner process where actually you realize everything else is absolute nonsense.
It's all white noise.
It is.
And what you're doing is, and this isn't just a estate agent, but I think you as a person, and I definitely think that you are doing a growth, you're having a growth now what moment,
Yeah.
right in at, and I really mean that. And I think that I could see that within your work now, because you're coming out of, because let's face it, in your personal life, and I have no idea whether you are an agent or not, are you now?
So
You dabble.
It's funny, I dabble.
So
Yeah.
I've gone right off piece there. So
Yeah.
go back to, you've been your agent, blah, blah, blah. Let's quickly whip through your estate agency world, and then where you got to all of a sudden a few years ago
Yeah.
with...
So do you want me to go through
Please,
that?
I'm so sorry.
So no problem at all. So where were we? We sort of 16 started that
agent.
job in a estate agency, did my A-levels on the side, and kept going really. I went from answering the phones to doing viewings, from doing viewings to negotiating sales, and then all of a sudden somebody says, actually, could you cover that 2 p.m. valuation? And all of a sudden you're a valuer, and that's exactly how accidental it happens in most agencies. Actually, there's no clear progression, and nobody necessarily shows you what to do. You learn by copying other people's habits and mistakes as well. So you get thrown in at the deep end, and you do all of that. And admittedly, if you do love people, then I think it's a great industry to get into, because
100%.
you will be able to talk to numerous people if you feel that you are the answer to people's problems. And that's something that I used to have in me in abundance, that I would basically consider myself as a fixer of problems for people in my life in general. But if you've got that personality, and that can be a very toxic trait, but if you have, then estate agency is great for you, because you'll find no end of people that are willing to talk to you about their marital problems, their money problems, why this house isn't the state that it should be, and you know, and so on. So I think it's one of those things. So I did a bit of that for a while. I then went off and at a later stage, at the age of 20, did a little bit of university. I did English literature for 3 years, which was interesting. And I worked as a journalist as well during
You
uni.
can say that.
Yeah. I always loved sort of writing and the creative side of things. But then when I came back out into the real world and needed to feed myself again, it was always a estate agency that I went back to. And that's kind of been the constant theme since then. I've worked at a number of different places in London and also in Manchester. And then I suppose I had a bit of a turning point in 2008 when the credit crunch.
So would you call that a now what moment?
It was one of the now what moments, and it was the first now what moment of almost where you are maturing a little bit, and you realize that nobody's coming to save you.
Yes.
And those are the bits in my life. Every time you get to one of those moments where you realize no one else is going to help you out of this hole, you've got to do it yourself. I think that is like an ultimate now what moment in everybody's life. And I've had several of those, but 2008 was definitely one of them. I was a director of an established local firm. We had a great estate agency, massive management book. We had a building services arm to the business, and it was just one of those success stories, and everybody was reaping the benefit. And then 2008, it was like we were undertakers, but everybody had stopped dying, and there was absolutely no business to be done. And I remember...
What a great analogy.
Yeah, well, I heard one of my directors at the time turn around to the entire company on one of the Monday morning meetings and go, this is who we are. We're undertakers, and everyone stopped dying, and it stayed with me since then. And I think then I had to go and sort of find, my sort of the comfortable niche I'd developed for
Had you got
myself.
children? Were you married?
I was married. I had one child at the time.
Yeah.
So I've got three now, but I had just the first at the time. So it was a scary time
Scary, yeah.
because I was driving a lovely car. I had a lovely job. Everybody knew what I did. You just started to develop that kind of cachet of clients as well, and you're developing a name for yourself. And you literally think, if you would have said to me, "Can anything knock you off your perch?" I would have said, "Nah." But then life comes along,
Yeah.
and Northern Rock started shutting down, and then, as you know, very quickly we found ourselves in a mess. And as a result of that, I had to go and find alternative employment very quickly. And I did. I took a job in a property management firm.
Okay.
And so I went from selling sort of multi-million-pound houses on the Monday, and on Wednesday I was checking out a block toilet in Burnley, which is not as glamorous, let me
No,
tell
of
you.
course.
So I did that. So I think that was one of the kind of now what moments where you have to realise that you can lose everything if you need to.
So I'll tell you a little period of time there. At that point, I've got a friend who I desperately wanted to get onto this podcast, and he won't come, and the reasons being will become obvious. He owned a multi-million-pound
Yeah.
mortgage company dealing with subprime.
Subprime, yeah.
Oh, my life. He was offered eye-watering amount of money to sell it, and he became, and was, Mr. Billy Big Bollocks, came from normal to...
Yeah.
He went from zero to hero overnight, and just as quickly as he got there, he was offered loads and loads of money and decided not to, and then it all came crashing down.
Yeah.
And what it taught him, and I'm not putting words in his mouth, was that same thing. It can all go within an instant,
It can do.
and he's gone back to being the person that I really like.
I think, I don't know, there's a line in a song that I really love that everyone knows: fat birds can't fly. And that's the whole thing. If your head gets too big and you think that you are absolutely indestructible, then at that point, you're never going to get off the ground. You're never going to fly. And I think that it's good that life actually does have these waves of kind of now what moments that knock you off your perch and that challenge the ideas of what you thought was safe, what you thought was absolutely sacrosanct, nobody could ever take it away from you, can be taken away in a flash.
And that can be done in any, obviously, as we know, in any industry.
Yeah.
So do you have a mantra? How did you get through that, or did you not think it through?
I didn't think it through at the time. I had some moments where I came back home and I was literally in tears.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't go back in there tomorrow. And somebody very wise told me, you have to go back in there tomorrow because you've got mouths to feed, and for now this is what you need to do to get them fed, and so you do. And I think what's really interesting to me is that if you, as in most things in life, if you just keep going, and really that's the mantra.
My thing is this too will pass. You'll have heard me say it a lot of times.
I heard it,
because
yeah.
it is you feel there's nowhere to go, and obviously as we sadly know in life, people can't see their way out of that, but this too will pass. It's just giving it time.
So and I'll tell you how that also, trying to just push through it, kind of comes full circle. So in that particular story, I joined this property management company as a nobody, just checking out block toilets.
Yeah.
But then very quickly, that property management company became part of the same subprime crisis because it had a staggering £70 million of mortgages with 11 high street lenders. I'm not talking about back street lenders.
No.
We're talking about the main banks. And that was an RMD that kind of ran this group, was a very charismatic character. But that affected his mental health to the point at which one day I got a phone call from his wife telling me, listen, he's not going to be in for this meeting with the banks today. Could you step in? And I had no idea about the lending or anything. But so I went from block toilets to negotiating a £70 million overdraft effectively, or loans, or whatever, mortgages with all of these lenders. And that to me was a tremendous learning curve.
Yeah.
And very quickly,
And now what moment there?
a real now what moment. And that stood me in good stead for the next chapter of my life, because I then understood, hang on, where there is absolute despair, there's also opportunity. Because on the back end of all of this, after that company had kind of, it looked like it was going to bed, the rest of the market started to pull out. So we're talking about 2010. We'd started all to wake up, and as estate agents, we thought, oh, we can start to open branches again, and so on. And so I was approached by my then kind of business partner to be, who said, well, I'm buying an agency. Will you come and run it with me? And what's really interesting is that my first kind of flurry of jobs were all from people who had had issues with their banks and needed somebody to negotiate on their behalf from a property perspective. And that kind of, for the first 5 years, was just the most tremendous income stream. So
presumably you were self-employed or subcontracting out? How did you negotiate
so what back
that?
then? So he came along and he sort of said, I'm buying this agency. We've got the kind of business background, but I don't have any of the front end experience. So if you come in and do this, then you will run it, and we'll split it. And initially, when he came to me with the proposal, it was, you don't take any salary out of the business. That will be your contribution, but you'll have 50% of it. So it's a great opportunity. You won't have to put your hand in your pocket. And I had that. I had a moment where I went, great opportunity, but I can't take this, because I was a wage slave for all intents and purposes, and I couldn't come off that wheel. So I remember making that phone call, really difficult phone call, saying thanks, but no thanks. I'm not going to be able to take you up on it. And the nice thing about that story is he then went back to his advisors, who basically said, yeah, it's a big ask, actually. You're not going to find anybody necessarily that is willing to work on that basis. So we came to a much more amicable arrangement where I was sort of salaried, but there would be a bit of an upside for me. And we took...
you couldn't do that anyway. You've got children, you've got mouths to feed. Had you got one or two, or...?
So I had two at that stage. But I think that there are some people that are more fearless when it comes to, entrepreneurial spirit. They're just willing to sort of put everything on the line.
But I think there's a lot of people out there, particularly in the estate agency world, who believe they're entrepreneurs and shouldn't be.
Yeah, there is. I think you can be overconfident. Is the point. I think at the time, though, I was sort of underconfident, if that's a word. I just didn't have the...
It is a word, yeah.
I didn't have that kind of backbone to sort of say, right, well, I'm going to risk it a little bit more. But I didn't need to in the end, and we established this great business.
I think that people can take a look at you, maybe take a look at me and think, they've got their shit together.
Yeah.
But actually, everybody goes through the same doubt, the same feeling of, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. But you're like a bit like a swan, aren't you? And underneath you're thinking, I'll go blag it.
I think
that's human nature.
Human nature, that's life in general, but
it's
particularly also, I think if you work in, I know every industry has its own little ups and downs.
It's not just agency,
It's not just agency, but particularly if you get into the mindset of agency, there are a lot of moments at which you do feel lost. You do feel like, why am I doing this? What's going on? And you need to keep this veneer of, everything's calm and I've got my shit together.
Yeah.
When a lot of us don't. And so I think sometimes that people just need to hear.
One of the reasons why I set this podcast up was for that reason, because there are people who will be driving to work and, running, walking, whatever they do, and listening to this and thinking, oh God, that's me. And I think the only, my little pearl of wisdom is this too will pass, and start to talk to people.
Yeah.
That can help and reach out. So anyway, on that, go back then. So with 2008, finished plunging toilets in 2010, and you're now
started plunging banks instead. And then get back into agency. And so the task was to take a very well-established agency that was the type of place that your grandma would have sold a house,
Yeah.
but not the place that your kids would consider selling their house, and you would sort of be like, no, that's not for me, was to take a sort of a trusted brand, but a stuffy brand, and kind of bring it into this century kicking and screaming. So we did that, and it was hard. It's a sort of a lesson in branding as well. You need to get across a personality. And that is also something that I'd encourage people
I think
to do.
what's unusual is the fact that people can't remember there was no social media. It was all letters, phone calls, and newspapers
billboards,
or
if you could
billboards.
get them.
That
Yeah.
was it, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
So we did, and I remember calling in, I think it was Trinity Mirror Group, whoever were running the Manchester Evening News at the
Was
time.
Trinity.
And they came in, and I said, you know, we need to change the appearance of our company. We want to be regarded as fun. We want to sort of push the envelope a bit and push some boundaries. And they designed a really successful campaign for us that you could not run today, in this day and age. It was all based on doors, basically, because we're estate agents. But it would have been, you know, a door handle. So the tagline would have been "Love handles." You know, we had one famously that was a big shiny door knocker that said, "Lovely knockers, we've got a queue of reliable buyers waiting outside your door." Things that have like that sense of carry on today that I'd absolutely be cancelled for, but at the time was very much not just acceptable, but it really broke that kind of stuffy image that
Could have been Ricky Gervais in his vodka, couldn't it?
could have been. But it broke that kind of very stuffy veneer that this company had. And also estate agents, again, taking themselves far too seriously. You're not professional all the time. You don't need to be professional all the time. You can also be human, and you can also share a laugh with your audience if you want. So we did that, and that really successfully kind of changed the look and feel of the business. And if you back it with professionalism, you can get away with it. I think is the story. Yeah.
So we got that.
Yeah.
That's a period in time.
That's a period in time. So
then
that was going really well.
Yeah.
But that grew. It was a growing business, and there were a few sort of moments there. I think, you know, managing your team and staff members, that's another challenge.
But that's just business, isn't it?
Completely.
So
and we got to a stage where both of us and both partners, I think if you work together as intensively as we did, and we really did, and we were sort of notorious micromanagers, in as much as I probably wasn't, and I'm still not today. I'm quite happy to let you get on and do your thing if I can trust you to do it. But my business partner absolutely was one of those guys that had to be over every inch of the business, and as you know, I kind of lockstep with him. We did that together. We poured over every inch of the business, and we agonized over everything for hours, and it just never ever stopped.
Yeah.
It was we'd come in early in the morning and discuss business and strategy. We'd go back home, have something to eat, and then we'd be back on the phone again, doing it in the evening. And it became this never-ending loop of where the business just takes up all the kind of oxygen in your life. And I think as a result of that, our relationship became quite frayed over time, because it's a marriage like any other.
I've been there, so I know that.
And I think sometimes we don't give business partnerships credit for being, let's face it, you probably spend more time with a business partner than you do with your spouse.
Well, I mean, obviously, I realise you're no longer in that, so we can only assume how that ended. But if you were to look back now, would you have done anything different with him to save the relationship or the friendship?
I would have, if I think I could have done, I might have been stronger in sort of just managing boundaries at some point. And I would have been, there were a few things that I regret in my professional career, things that in hindsight are easy for me to go, you should never have got involved in this spat with a competitor, for instance. So we were very guilty of always looking over our shoulder at what competitors were doing.
Okay.
It consumed us.
So you weren't the trailblazer then. So were you a trailblazer in your bit? Because I think I was.
I think we were trailblazers. I think that we were very capable of us.
But you just kept looking back.
But I think that's the mistake. I think the mistake is that I think, like you, have probably understood that if you're going to do something well, just get on and do it, and then, you know, concentrate on what it is that you're doing, and don't give too much thought to what the competition are doing. We agonized over what the competition was doing. I ended up doing pieces for property industry eye on portal juggling because I was obsessed with the fact that my competition were getting away with it.
Right.
And although we, you know, very happily became part of the story that ended portal juggling and forced Rightmove to change their rules, it also just took up too much of my headspace.
Yeah.
So I think if there's anything that I could go back and change, it would have been that particularly.
Because again, there'll be people listening, watching, who are where you were, where I was. And that's why I was interested to see if you've got any, I hate using this term, golden nuggets. Is there anything that you would impart that would get them to think things differently?
I just think you can, you know, this new generation, our Gen Zers, talk about the parts of your brain being, you know, rented out for free to other people. That's what you do when you concentrate too much on what your competition's doing. Be aware of what people are doing. Be aware of where you place your product and your offering in the marketplace. You need to. I mean, that's market research.
I think what I was trying to get there was that in terms of the business relationship, because it's a breakup of a marriage, and it is a now what moment. So rather than the ins and outs of the business, but I think how you handle that.
I think you need to be able to sit down, and it's not always possible, but to be able to sit down and say, this doesn't make me happy anymore. This kind of conversation and the constant agonizing over where we are with our competition doesn't really do me any good, and it's not doing them any good, and you, and so on. And I think both, it's funny because I had dinner with David, my old business partner, probably about a couple of months ago, and we both spoke about it in the same terms, that if we could, we would have sort of gone back and done that part of things differently, and realised actually in the fullness of time, it doesn't really matter if you kind of just stick
because
to
I think that in any partnership, like any marriage, I suppose, resentment creeps in, and if you don't address the elephant in that room, it just consumes you, gets bigger, and then it blows up.
It does, and I am not good in personal relationships or business relationships in necessarily addressing the elephant in the room. I am very good at pushing everything down under and finding ways that we can actually shove more under this carpet than you can imagine, and just keep carrying on. And I think that a very hard life lesson is to, you know, not do that as much.
So it all obviously ended with you and David in whatever capacity it did.
Well, I can tell you, so COVID hit, and I think for me, and I'm not unique because I know that this happened to, as was pointed out to me, it happened to 7 billion other people on the planet as well at the same time. But when your routine, I think it's peculiar to men as well, that men, like, I know where I need to be at 9 a.m. I know what I've been doing. I know what suit I'm wearing. I know exactly what my routine to the day is. I know what time roughly I'm going to be home. I know what my obligations are. And when somebody sort of rips that away from you and sort of says, actually, you don't know what tomorrow is going to be, and you don't even know what you're going to be doing this afternoon, my head just went to pieces, and I fell apart very quickly in that. And I think our business relationship as well got very frayed, not necessarily because of anything anybody did, but the whole company was on furlough. Everybody was what's going to be, and I didn't have any of the answers. David and I were picking our way through it as all the kind of the announcements were coming through on TV. So you know, none of us knew where we were going to be, and I was convinced actually we weren't ever going to sell another house for a long, long time. How wrong I turned out to be.
That was,
But I think that kind of forced break in my life kind of got me also to think about, well, are there different things out there? And as it happened at the beginning of that lockdown period, like a knight in pink shining armor,
Oh God, no.
Simon Whale, gracefully falls through the door. So Simon and I had started doing a bit of a podcast before lockdown, and he said, "Look, do you fancy doing this on Zoom?" And I was like, "I'm not sure that's going to work."
I think for anybody who doesn't even know who Simon Whale is,
Yeah.
remember this podcast goes out to lots of different people in different industries. He's definitely
Google him. Google him.
Yeah, Google him. That's all you need to know. He's definitely one of those divisive characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love him, hate him, but admire him all at the
Yeah.
same time. Exceptionally intelligent. So anyway, I'm not going to go on about Simon because it's not about Simon,
No,
but it's
Simon contacted
your...
me at the time and he said, "Do you fancy doing some interviews with? We'll do interviews with agents. We'll do interviews with suppliers. We'll talk to trainers." And I said, "I've got literally nothing else to do." So it was like music to my ears. And over that period of time, we spoke to people like Tom Panos, Josh Fegan in Australia because they were also in lockdown. Stephen Brown. So we did all the main trainers. We did a lot of agents as well.
Yeah.
Loads of suppliers, and we were the only show in town at the time.
At the time.
So I got to hone a new skill, which is sort of interviewing people and presenting a little bit. And actually that tapped into my journalistic roots. So my head was turned.
Because I think that from my point of view, I found you within that space, which sounds very corny, but I did. But that's great from a business point, but actually, let's stop all that.
Yeah.
Can we just go back about the other side of your life?
Yeah.
So where were you in all of that headspace with family?
So I mean, I was just with everybody else. I was absolutely confused. I didn't know what my role was in life anymore.
Including being a dad,
including
father, son.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have any of the answers at that point.
No.
The best thing that I could do for my mum during lockdown was try and get some toilet paper, which everybody was trying to, those are the kind of things that stick out in my mind. But if you say, were you able to be an amazing this, that, or the other? No. But the one thing that did come out of that period of time that has kind of now been a constant in my life is that, and so Simon's a small part of that story. He allowed me to access this online world of agents
and meet people like
you and Ben and other people,
whatever.
And really sort of I never knew, because most of us actually outside of conference season are tremendously insular. We get on and we are stuck in our own little worlds, and we don't necessarily talk to other people all the time. The agency world today is very different to how it was then.
And it's only 5 years with these crackers, isn't it?
But it's amazing, and that's how communities build. But what was interesting is talking about community was that I had then realised that, hang on, this whole thing about recording things on Zoom and perhaps putting it out on social media to people was actually back then fairly new. So now, with no disrespect to anybody intended, everyone's got a podcast and everyone's got a voice.
Which is why I was really didn't think, I don't know whether I want to do it, because we've all seen it. It all gets a bit jaded. It's the same old people, me and you on it. But there aren't there? But mine was more general to try and sort of get
can you add something to the
and can I bring something to it? And I think I can. So, but like you, I was in that. Everybody just put their head down. We started to understand and see people that we never really knew before or could never really connect to. And actually, the accessibility to those people now. And that's not just agency. I think there's a lot in the world in general that can learn from what we've gathered.
I think so. So I think I try to take those lessons and apply them in other areas. So I'm... one of the things we did for my community, so for our synagogue, for instance, we've got 700 members who were all in lockdown and were wondering, well, how they can't come to synagogue anymore to worship or to speak to people, to socialize. How do you connect with those people? How do you do it? So we took, I called the rabbi and I said, you know what we'll do? We'll do a talk show where you and I will discuss various different topics and people can live comment on it and we'll answer the questions. And we did that throughout lockdown.
Amazing.
And it was the most tremendous experience, because it is a bit of a one-way experience, because you're putting stuff out there. People are able to comment, but it's not a direct conversation.
Did you ever find the man called Ben Madden reading bedtime stories?
Yes.
Which in itself is,
I
I've got
did.
them saved as my favourite things to read.
Yeah, that's that.
And watch. So yeah, I think
No, but
it's same space,
we all
isn't it?
did, and you know, taking a leaf out of Ben's bedtime storybook, that's the other thing that we did with businesses. So we at the time of lockdown decided, okay,
Is this we, you, and Simon Whale?
no, this is we actually is in the estate agency
Okay,
business,
yeah.
because one thing you'll find is that I juggle a few hats at the same time. But so Simon and I had started interviewing people. The agency was still sort of shut down because we hadn't gone back to work then, but we'd started to do community-based content. So these are the shops in the area that are still delivering. This is where this is Nigel, who used to be a sales negotiator. He's now baking his favorite lemon cake in front, you know, and we pushed out all of that content over lockdown, and it meant that we were one of the only agents still communicating with our audience. And I sort of took that to the nth degree, that after lockdown, when we all came back, by that point I'd got over the whole, oh, I don't like seeing myself on camera, to, oh, I like seeing myself on camera, we're going to do more of it. So I started doing not only just property content, but I would also do local community content, as in you know, local shops.
In effect, you replace the telly, don't you?
We did.
You replaced the telly,
We
and
did.
I think that's what's
We did.
in that 5 years. You know, the world of TikTok and Instagram and all the video and all of that has replaced your normal TV and newspapers.
It's really interesting, and I think that, you know, if people are looking, like today, we teach people. Chris Watkin will teach people that you've got to become the town mayor of your town, and my advice to people is, don't overcomplicate it.
So this is the end of part 1. If you really enjoyed it and you want to know about the next Now What moment with David, please tune in for part 2, which will drop next week.